The morning sun cast long shadows across Michigan Avenue as Robert Bobby Mitchell adjusted his worn-out baseball cap in the reflection of a luxury storefront. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here stood the CEO of Mitchell Development Corporation, worth over $3 billion, deliberately dressed in tattered clothing, his normally well-groomed face hidden behind a week's worth of stubble. This was his ritual, performed once a month without fail, shedding the trappings of wealth to walk among Chicago's forgotten. Bobby called it his reality check, though his executive team would have called it insanity if they ever discovered his secret habit. He left behind his Patek Philippe watch, his Tesla, his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, everything that defined Robert Mitchell in the public eye. For these precious few hours, he was just Bobby, a nameless face in the urban crowd. The charade had started 3 years ago, after a particularly brutal board meeting where he'd authorized the demolition of a low-income housing block to make way for luxury condominiums. The business decision had been sound, the profit margins exceptional. Yet something had cracked inside him that day when protesters gathered outside their corporate headquarters. He couldn't forget the eyes of a young woman holding a sign that read, "You're destroying more than buildings." That night he disguised himself for the first time, walking the very neighborhoods his company was systematically transforming, listening to conversations he was never meant to hear. It became his way of measuring the true impact of his business empire, of understanding what his wealth had insulated him from experiencing. Today's excursion felt different, though. Bobby had been distracted during his morning preparation, forgetting both breakfast and his usual water bottle. The June heat was unusually oppressive, the humidity making the air feel thick and difficult to breathe. Chicago summers could be brutal, especially in the concrete jungle of downtown, where the buildings trapped the heat like an oven. Still, he pushed forward, moving from the Magnificent Mile toward Grant Park. His legs felt increasingly heavy as he walked. Bobby wiped sweat from his brow, realizing too late that dehydration was setting in. He should turn back, find somewhere to rest, but stubborn pride kept him moving forward. The world began to tilt slightly. Disoriented, he stumbled toward a concrete bench near the park entrance, but his knees buckled before he could reach it. The pavement rushed up to meet him as consciousness started to slip away. In those blurry moments before blackness took hold, Bobby became acutely aware of the human traffic flowing around him, like water around a stone. Some pedestrians glanced his way, their eyes quickly darting away. A young professional in a tailored suit actually stepped over his outstretched hand without breaking stride. A teenager snickered, nudging his friend as they passed. "Another drunk," Bobby heard someone mutter. The irony cut deeper than any business loss ever had. He who could buy and sell half the buildings visible from where he lay was now invisible himself. Nobody stopped, nobody helped. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't the educational exercise in empathy he'd designed. Real fear gripped him as his vision darkened around the edges. What if he lost consciousness completely? Would anyone call for help, or would they continue to flow around him, this human obstacle, until night fell? The thought terrified him more than any financial crisis ever had. Through the growing haze, he became vaguely aware of a small figure approaching. Unlike the hurried professionals and distracted tourists, this person moved with purpose toward him. Bobby tried to focus, but his vision swam. Small sneakers worn at the edges, faded jeans with a patch on one knee, a plastic bag swinging from one hand. A child. The figure knelt beside him, and Bobby could finally make out the face of a girl, perhaps 10 or 11 years old. Her brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes clean but well worn. What struck him most were her eyes, serious, concerned, but without the revulsion or fear he'd seen in the adults who'd passed by. "Mister?" Her voice was clear despite the city noise surrounding them. "Are you okay?" Bobby tried to respond, but his mouth felt like sandpaper. He managed only a weak groan. Without hesitation, the girl opened her plastic bag and pulled out a half-empty water bottle. With careful movements that suggested a maturity beyond her years, she supported his head with one small hand and held the bottle to his lips with the other. The water was warm, slightly sweet from whatever had been in the bottle before, but it was the most welcome thing Bobby had ever tasted. He drank greedily until the girl gently pulled the bottle away. "Slow," she cautioned. "Too fast will make you sick." Who was this child? Bobby wondered. as strength gradually returned to his limbs. Around them, the busy Chicago lunch crowd continued to stream past, some now casting curious glances at the unlikely pair, but still not stopping to help. The girl seemed unbothered by the stares, focused entirely on the task at hand. From her bag, she produced a paper-wrapped sandwich that had been bitten into on one end. Without hesitation, she tore off the untouched portion and offered it to him. "You need to eat something," she said with the authority of someone used to caring for others. "Sugar and water will help you feel better." Shame washed over Bobby as he accepted the food. This child, who clearly had little to spare, was sharing her lunch with him without question. He took a small bite, not from hunger, but because refusing seemed impossible in the face of such generosity. "Thank you," he managed to whisper. The girl nodded, settling beside him on the pavement, as if they were simply two friends sharing a meal in the park. "I'm Lily," she said after a moment. "Lily Parker." "Bobby," he replied, using only his first name as he always did during these excursions. It wasn't a complete lie, at least. Lily studied him with those serious eyes. "You're not used to being on the streets, are you?" The observation startled him. His disguises had fooled everyone else for years. "What makes you say that?" She shrugged. "Your hands. They're too clean, and you got sick because you weren't prepared. Gotta carry water, especially when it's hot like today." Bobby looked down at his hands. He'd rubbed them with dirt that morning, but they still lacked the ingrained grime of true homelessness. This child had seen through him in seconds. "You're very observant," he said finally. "I have to be." The simple statement carried a weight that made Bobby's heart constrict. As his head cleared, he noticed details about Lily he'd missed before. Despite her worn clothes, everything was meticulously clean. Her sneakers, though frayed at the edges, had been carefully wiped clean of mud. Her hair, while simply styled, was neatly combed. This was a child living in poverty but with dignity intact. They sat in silence for a few minutes, Bobby regaining his strength while Lily kept a watchful eye on him. Around them, the city continued its relentless pace, but in their small bubble on the concrete, time seemed to slow. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Lily asked finally. Bobby nodded. "Yes. I'll be fine now, thanks to you." He should leave, return to his penthouse, end this charade that had nearly turned dangerous. Yet something kept him seated beside this remarkable child who had been the only person in all of Chicago to stop and help a stranger in need. "What about you?" he asked. "Shouldn't you be in school?" It was June, after all, but not yet summer break. Lily's expression shuttered slightly. "I have a half day today," she said, but the slight shift of her eyes told Bobby it was a lie. "I'm selling candy after lunch." She gestured to her plastic bag, which Bobby now noticed contained individually wrapped caramels and chocolate bars. "My grandma needs medicine." The matter-of-fact way she stated this made the situation all the more heartbreaking. While Bobby's world revolved around investment portfolios and property acquisitions, this child was selling candy to buy medicine for her grandmother. The contrast was so stark, it left him momentarily speechless. Lily misinterpreted his silence. "I'm not begging," she said quickly, pride evident in her voice. "I'm working. Every candy is $1. It's a fair trade." "I have no doubt," Bobby assured her. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the $20 he allowed himself to carry during these excursions. It was a small amount, deliberately limited to prevent him from solving problems with money, rather than truly experiencing the reality of poverty. Now, though, it seemed insulting in its meagerness. "I'd like to buy some candy," he said, offering the bill. Lily's eyes widened slightly at the 20, but her business sense quickly took over. She counted out exactly 20 pieces of candy, arranging them neatly before handing them over. No charity accepted here, her actions made clear. Bobby respected that. As he pocketed the candy, a question formed in his mind. "Lily, why did you stop to help me when no one else would?" The girl seemed surprised by the question, as if the answer were obvious. "Because you needed help," she said simply. Then, after a moment's reflection, she added, "And because I know what it's like when people look right through you." The words hit Bobby with the force of a physical blow. How many people had he looked through in his life? How many Lilies had become invisible to him as he moved through his privileged existence? Before he could respond, Lily glanced at her worn wristwatch and stood up with sudden urgency. "I have to go. Grandma will worry if I'm late." Bobby stood too, steadier now but still shaken by more than just his physical weakness. "Thank you again. You might have saved my life today." Lily shrugged off his gratitude with the casual acceptance of someone unaccustomed to praise. "You take care now. And remember, always carry water." With that simple advice, she turned and disappeared into the crowd, her small figure quickly swallowed by the sea of adults rushing to afternoon appointments. Bobby stood watching long after she'd vanished from sight. Something profound had shifted inside him, though he couldn't yet articulate what it was. The encounter had been brief, but it felt monumental in a way his billion-dollar deals never did. He made his way back to his car, parked discreetly in a public garage several blocks away. As he shed his disguise and reclaimed his regular identity, Robert Mitchell couldn't shake the image of Lily's serious eyes or the weight of her simple wisdom. The following morning, seated in his corner office 52 floors above the Chicago streets, Bobby found himself distracted during an important acquisition meeting. While his CFO droned on about projected returns and market forecasts, his mind kept drifting to the little girl who had shared her meager lunch with a stranger. "Robert, your thoughts on the proposal?" His assistant's voice snapped him back to the present. 6 expectant faces stared at him from around the conference table. Bobby cleared his throat. "I need more information before moving forward," he said, a response vague enough to cover his inattention. "Jennifer, prepare a detailed impact assessment for the neighborhood. I want to know what happens to the current residents if we proceed." The request was unusual enough that Jennifer actually looked up from her tablet with surprise. In 10 years working together, he had never asked for that kind of report. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell," she said, recovering quickly. "I'll have it for you by Friday." The meeting continued, but Bobby's focus had fundamentally changed. For the first time, he found himself wondering about the human cost of his business decisions rather than just the financial gains. That afternoon, against his better judgment, Bobby found himself driving toward Grant Park again. He told himself he was simply checking on the area for potential development, but he knew the real reason. He needed to see if Lily was there again. He parked his Aston Martin a few blocks away and walked toward the spot where they'd met. No disguise today. He wore a casual but clearly expensive outfit that marked him as what he was, a wealthy man in an expensive suit. He didn't see her at first, and disappointment washed over him with surprising intensity. Then, near the eastern entrance to the park, he spotted a small figure approaching tourists with a plastic bag. Her sales technique was subtle, not aggressive enough to annoy, but persistent enough to make a few sales. Bobby watched as she successfully sold candy to an elderly couple, her smile brightening momentarily before returning to that serious expression he remembered. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. Lily noticed him when he was still several yards away, her eyes widening slightly as she took in his transformed appearance. Gone was the disheveled man from yesterday, replaced by someone who clearly belonged to a different world. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by confusion. "Bobby?" she asked hesitantly when he was close enough. He nodded, feeling strangely nervous. "Hello, Lily." She studied him with that penetrating gaze, taking in his tailored shirt, designer watch, and Italian leather shoes. "You're not homeless," she stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "No," he admitted. "I'm not." Her expression hardened slightly. "You were pretending." The accusation stung more than it should have. "Yes and no," Bobby said carefully. "I was experiencing something different from my normal life." He hesitated, then added, "But what happened yesterday, needing help, that was real." Lily considered this, her young face thoughtful beyond her years. Finally, she nodded, accepting his explanation with the simple pragmatism of childhood. "Why are you back?" she asked. It was a fair question, one Bobby had been asking himself all day. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said. "What you did yesterday, stopping when no one else would, it meant a lot to me." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done it." "But they didn't," Bobby pointed out gently. "Everyone else walked by, only you stopped." She had no response to that, instead glancing down at her bag of candy. "I still have to sell these before I go home." Bobby reached for his wallet. "I'll buy them all." "No." Her refusal was immediate and firm. "That's not how it works. I'm not a charity case." The pride in her voice made Bobby's chest tighten. This child understood dignity in ways many adults never would. "You're right," he said, putting his wallet away. "I apologize." An uncomfortable silence fell between them, the gulf between their worlds suddenly vast and apparent. Bobby searched for something to say that might bridge the gap. "How's your grandmother today?" Lily's expression softened at the mention of her grandmother. "Today's a good day." She was able to get up and make breakfast. The simple achievement spoke volumes about the normal state of affairs in Lily's home. Bobby nodded, understanding more than she realized. "That's good to hear." He hesitated, then asked, "Would it be all right if I walked with you for a while? Maybe I could learn how to sell candy properly." The request clearly surprised her, but after a moment's consideration, Lily nodded. "Okay, but you have to follow my rules." "Absolutely," Bobby agreed solemnly. For the next hour, Robert Mitchell, CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, followed the instructions of a 10-year-old candy seller. He learned that smiling was essential, but staring was rude, that business travelers were poor prospects, but tourists were usually generous, that weekdays were better than weekends, and that persistence without aggression was the key to success. By the end of the hour, Lily had sold nearly half her inventory, and Bobby had gained insights into street-level economics that no business school could have taught him. As they sat on a park bench counting the day's earnings, Bobby observed Lily carefully sorting the bills, setting aside a specific amount in a separate pocket. "Budget management?" he asked with a small smile. Lily nodded seriously. "This is for Grandma's medicine," she explained, patting the segregated funds. "The rest is for food and bus fare." The matter-of-fact way she handled such adult responsibilities made Bobby's heart ache. Children her age should be worrying about homework and playground games, not medicine costs and household budgets. "Lily," he said carefully, "I'd like to help you and your grandmother if you'll let me." Her expression immediately closed off. "We don't need handouts." "Not a handout," Bobby clarified quickly. "A job, for you." This caught her attention. "What kind of job?" "A research assistant," he improvised. "I'm working on a project about how different people experience the city. Your perspective would be valuable. I'd pay you for your time and insights." Lily considered this, her natural skepticism battling with practical need. "How much?" The directness of her question made Bobby smile despite himself. This child was a natural negotiator. $20 an hour, he offered. 2 hours a day, 3 days a week. It was a generous wage even for an adult assistant, but Bobby wanted to ensure the money would make a real difference without overwhelming her pride. Lily's eyes widened slightly at the figure, though she tried to hide her reaction. "What would I have to do?" "Talk to me," Bobby said simply. "Show me places in your neighborhood. Tell me what works and what doesn't from your perspective. Help me understand how people really live in this city." It wasn't entirely a fabrication. Bobby had been contemplating a community-focused initiative for Mitchell development, something that might balance the profit-driven projects that had built his fortune. Lily's input could actually be valuable for such an endeavor. Lily thought about it for a long moment, her young face serious as she weighed the offer. Finally, she extended her hand with formal gravity. "Deal, but I can only work after I finish selling my candy each day." Bobby shook her small hand, matching her seriousness. "Agreed. When can you start?" "Tomorrow," she decided. "Meet me here at 2 o'clock." With the business arrangement settled, Lily gathered her remaining candy and stood. "I have to go now. Grandma will be waiting." Bobby nodded, reluctant to end their time together, but respecting her responsibilities. "Tomorrow at 2 then. I'll be here." As he watched her walk away, Bobby felt a strange mixture of emotions. The girl's resilience and dignity touched something deep within him, awakening feelings he'd thought long buried under years of corporate ambition. He'd been truthful about wanting her perspective for potential community projects, but he knew his motivation went deeper than business. He needed, to help this child who had helped him without hesitation. The next day arrived with Bobby uncharacteristically nervous as 2 o'clock approached. He'd cancelled a board meeting, claiming a personal emergency, something he'd never done in his entire career. His assistant Jennifer had been so shocked she'd asked if he needed medical attention. Now dressed in casual clothes that wouldn't intimidate Lily, but still cost more than most people's monthly rent, he waited at their designated meeting spot. She arrived precisely on time, her candy bag noticeably lighter than the day before. "Good sales day?" he asked by way of greeting. Lily nodded, a hint of pride crossing her face. Sold 28 pieces. That's better than yesterday. Bobby's admiration was genuine. Impressive. You're quite the businesswoman. She accepted the compliment with a small smile. Where do we start? I thought you could show me your neighborhood, Bobby suggested. If that's okay with you. Lily considered this, then nodded. We can take the bus, but you'll stand out. She eyed his designer jeans and cashmere sweater skeptically. Bobby looked down at his outfit, seeing it through her eyes. Even his casual clothes screamed wealth. I see your point. Any suggestions? Lily studied him critically. Roll up your sleeves. Take off your watch. And try not to look so... She searched for the word. Important. Bobby laughed, surprised by her perceptiveness, and followed her instructions. The bus ride to Lily's neighborhood was an education in itself. Located on the city's south side, it was an area Bobby had seen only from the window of his car as he drove to meetings or the airport. Now seated beside Lily on public transportation, he observed the gradual transformation of the urban landscape as they moved away from downtown's gleaming towers. Buildings grew older, stores smaller, streets less maintained. Security grates covered most shop windows, and empty lots punctuated blocks where buildings had been demolished and never replaced. Yet there was life here too. Community gardens in unexpected corners, murals brightening otherwise dilapidated walls, children playing in improvised playgrounds. This is our stop, Lily announced, pressing the signal button. They disembarked near a small corner market with faded awnings. Lily led the way with the confidence of someone navigating familiar territory, pointing out landmarks as they walked. That's my school, she said, indicating a brick building surrounded by a chain-link fence. And that's where we get groceries when we have extra money. The library is down that way. They let me use the computers for homework. And this, she stopped in front of a 3-story apartment building with peeling paint, but neatly swept steps, is where we live. Bobby took it all in, seeing the neighborhood through Lily's eyes, not as a collection of potential development properties, but as a living community with strengths and challenges. Would you like to meet my grandma? Lily asked suddenly. The question caught Bobby off guard. He hadn't expected the invitation, but something in her expression suggested it was important to her. I'd be honored, he said sincerely. Lily led him up 2 flights of narrow stairs to apartment 3B. Before opening the door, she turned to him with unexpected seriousness. Don't look sad when you see her, she instructed. She doesn't like pity. Bobby nodded, understanding. I promise. Lily unlocked the door, calling out as she entered. Grandma, I'm home. I brought someone to meet you. The apartment was small but immaculately clean. Mismatched furniture showed signs of careful repair, and the walls were decorated with hand-drawn pictures in colorful frames. Despite the obvious poverty, there was a warmth to the space that many of Bobby's luxurious properties lacked. Martha Parker sat in a worn armchair near the window, a crocheting project in her lap. She was a thin woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, her hands gnarled with arthritis but still moving steadily with her crochet hook. When she looked up, Bobby saw Lily's serious eyes mirrored in her grandmother's face. Who's this you've brought home, child? Martha's voice was soft but clear, carrying the slight musical cadence of the South. Lily approached her grandmother with evident affection. This is Mr. Bobby. He hired me as his research assistant. I'm helping him learn about our neighborhood. Martha's eyes, sharp despite her physical frailty, assessed Bobby with unmistakable suspicion. He couldn't blame her. A wealthy stranger taking an interest in her granddaughter would naturally raise concerns. Bobby stepped forward, extending his hand. Robert Mitchell, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you. Martha set aside her crocheting and accepted his handshake, her grip surprisingly firm. Martha Parker, I'd appreciate knowing exactly what kind of research my granddaughter is helping you with, Mr. Mitchell. The protective edge in her voice was unmistakable. Bobby explained his community development project, careful to emphasize that Lily's role was to provide perspective and local knowledge. He deliberately omitted his true identity as the CEO of Mitchell Development, describing himself simply as a businessman interested in community improvement. As he spoke, Martha's expression remained guarded, her eyes occasionally flicking to Lily, who was busily unpacking her candy bag and counting the day's earnings at the small kitchen table. $20 an hour seems generous for talking to a 10-year-old, Martha observed when he finished. There was no accusation in her tone, just careful assessment. Lily has insight many adults lack, Bobby replied honestly. She sees things others miss. That's valuable to me. Something in his sincerity must have registered with Martha because her expression softened slightly. She's always been observant, that one. Notices everything. Pride colored her voice as she glanced toward her granddaughter. Still, I'd like to be present for these research sessions. Of course, Bobby agreed immediately. I wouldn't have it any other way. Their conversation was interrupted by Lily approaching with a small bottle of pills. Time for your medicine, Grandma, she said, handing Martha the bottle along with a glass of water she'd filled at the kitchen sink. The casual way Lily managed her grandmother's medication schedule spoke volumes about the responsibilities she carried. Martha took the pills without complaint, though Bobby noticed her slight wince at swallowing them. Thank you, sweet pea. Lily nodded, then turned to Bobby. I can show you my neighborhood map now. I made it for a school project. Without waiting for a response, she disappeared into what Bobby presumed was her bedroom, returning moments later with a carefully drawn map on poster board. Bobby examined it with genuine interest. Lily had not only mapped the physical layout of her neighborhood, but had annotated it with personal observations. Good corner for candy sales. Mrs. Wilson gives out cookies on Tuesdays. Avoid after dark. Beautiful flowers in spring. It was a child's perspective, but revealing in its clarity about both the joys and dangers of her world. This is excellent work, Lily, Bobby said, impressed by her attention to detail. Would you mind if I took a picture of it? It would be helpful for my research. After receiving approval from both Lily and her grandmother, Bobby used his phone to photograph the map. As he did so, he noticed Martha watching him with thoughtful eyes. When Lily stepped away to use the bathroom, Martha spoke quietly. Mr. Mitchell, I may be old and sick, but I'm not blind. Those shoes you're wearing cost more than our rent, and that phone isn't something a regular researcher carries. Bobby met her gaze, deciding honesty was his best approach. You're very observant, Mrs. Parker, like your granddaughter. Martha's expression didn't change. What do you really want with Lily? The directness of the question demanded equal directness in response. Your granddaughter helped me when no one else would, Bobby said simply. I want to return that kindness. Martha studied him for a long moment before speaking again. Lily mentioned a man she helped in the park. Said he looked homeless but wasn't. That was you. Bobby nodded. I sometimes walk the city in disguise. It helps me understand perspectives I might otherwise miss. He expected skepticism or even anger at this admission, but Martha surprised him with a slow nod of understanding. We all wear masks, Mr. Mitchell. Some are just more obvious than others. Before Bobby could respond, Lily returned, and their conversation shifted to safer topics. For the next hour, Bobby listened as Lily shared stories about her neighborhood, the community garden where an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins taught local children about growing vegetables, the small bakery that gave away day-old bread to families in need, the after-school program at the local church that provided a safe space when Martha was too ill to watch Lily herself. Throughout her narration, Bobby noticed Martha's occasional coughing fits, which she tried to hide behind her hand. Lily would pause each time, watching her grandmother with worried eyes until the coughing subsided. As evening approached, Bobby recognized it was time to leave. He thanked both Parkers for their hospitality and arranged to meet Lily again in 2 days for another research session. Martha walked him to the door, moving slowly with the aid of a wooden cane. Lily believes in you, she said quietly as they reached the threshold. Don't make her regret it. The simple warning carried more weight than any legal contract Bobby had ever signed. I won't, he promised, meaning it more deeply than Martha could know. The bus ride back to downtown Chicago gave Bobby time to reflect on what he had witnessed. The contrast between the Parkers' careful management of extremely limited resources and his own excess was stark and uncomfortable. As his personal driver picked him up at the bus stop, having discreetly followed the bus route at Bobby's instruction, he found himself looking at the gleaming downtown skyline with different eyes. The following morning, Bobby surprised his executive team by calling an emergency strategy meeting. As his top executives filed into the conference room, expressions ranging from curious to concerned, Bobby remained standing at the head of the table rather than taking his usual seat. "I want to discuss a new direction for Mitchell Development," he began without preamble. "Our focus on luxury properties has been profitable, but I believe we're missing opportunities to make meaningful contributions to Chicago's communities." The confusion on his executives' faces might have been comical in another context. "Robert," his CFO ventured carefully, "our profit margins on luxury developments are at an all-time high. Why would we pivot now?" "Because there's more to success than profit margins, David," Bobby replied with a conviction that surprised even himself. "I'm not suggesting we abandon our current projects, but I want to allocate resources to community-focused developments, affordable housing, mixed-use spaces that serve neighborhood needs, renovation rather than demolition where possible." For the next hour, Bobby outlined his vision for a community development initiative that would operate alongside their existing luxury projects. He proposed setting aside 20% of their annual profits for investments in underserved neighborhoods, focusing initially on the South Side, where Lily and her grandmother lived. His executives' reactions ranged from cautious interest to outright skepticism, but Bobby's determination was unwavering. By meeting's end, he had assigned research teams to assess potential sites and community needs, with a deadline for initial proposals set for the following month. "One more thing," Bobby added as the meeting concluded. "I want to establish a healthcare fund for residents displaced by our previous developments. Many are facing medical challenges without adequate resources." His CFO looked particularly alarmed at this suggestion. "Robert, that opens us to significant liability. If we acknowledge responsibility for health issues—" "It's not about liability, David," Bobby interrupted firmly. "It's about doing what's right. Draw up the parameters and have them on my desk by Friday." As his team filed out, expressions still reflecting various degrees of confusion and concern, Jennifer remained behind. "This is about that personal emergency yesterday, isn't it?" she asked perceptively. Bobby smiled slightly. His assistant had always been more intuitive than most of his executives. "Let's just say I had a wake-up call, Jennifer. It's time Mitchell Development lived up to the development part of its name, developing communities, not just properties." Over the next several weeks, Bobby continued his meetings with Lily, each one revealing more about the challenges and strengths of her neighborhood. He met the community leaders she admired, Pastor Williams at the local church, Mrs. Gonzalez, who ran the corner bodega and kept an eye on neighborhood children, Mr. Jenkins with his community garden, and others who formed the support network that kept the community functioning despite limited resources. Through Lily's eyes, Bobby began to see beyond the statistics and property values that had previously defined these areas for him. He learned about the informal childcare networks that allowed parents to work, the skill-sharing systems that helped residents manage without expensive professional services, and the deep sense of mutual support that existed despite, or perhaps because of, the economic challenges. Martha's health continued to be a concern. Though she never complained, Bobby noticed her increasing fatigue and more frequent coughing fits. During one visit, while Lily was showing him a community mural she had helped paint, he gently broached the subject with Martha. "Have you seen a specialist about your condition, Mrs. Parker?" Martha's laugh held little humor. "Specialists cost specialist money, Mr. Mitchell. We make do with the clinic when we must." The resignation in her voice strengthened Bobby's resolve. That evening, after leaving the Parkers' apartment, he made a call to Dr. Eleanor Bennett, a pulmonary specialist who had treated his father years ago. "I need a favor, Eleanor," he said once pleasantries had been exchanged. "I have a friend who needs the best care available, but her financial situation is complicated. Can you see her as a personal favor to me?" Dr. Bennett, who had always respected Bobby's straightforward approach, agreed to arrange an appointment. The following day, Bobby approached Martha with the offer, careful to frame it as a connection rather than charity. "A friend of mine is a lung specialist at Chicago Memorial. She has an opening in her schedule and offered to see you if you're interested." Martha's pride was evident in her immediate stiffening. "I can't afford specialists, Mr. Mitchell, as I've mentioned." "She owes me a favor," Bobby countered smoothly. "No cost involved. Consider it payment for all the coffee and cookies you've provided during my visits." It wasn't entirely true. Bobby had already arranged to cover all costs through a private account. but the small deception seemed necessary to bridge the gap between Martha's dignity and her medical needs. After considerable persuasion, and with Lily's eager encouragement, Martha finally agreed to the appointment. The diagnosis came quickly: interstitial lung disease, advanced but potentially manageable with proper treatment. Dr. Bennett prescribed a regimen of medications and oxygen therapy that would improve Martha's quality of life significantly. Bobby arranged payment discreetly, ensuring Martha never saw the bills while maintaining the fiction that her care was covered through a special hospital program. As Martha's health stabilized under the new treatment plan, Lily blossomed. The constant worry that had given her such serious eyes began to fade, replaced by more frequent smiles and occasional glimpses of the carefree child she should have been all along. Bobby found himself increasingly invested in her future, discussing educational opportunities and arranging for tutoring to help her catch up on schoolwork she had missed while caring for her grandmother. At Mitchell Development, the community initiative was taking shape. Bobby had assembled a dedicated team led by Jennifer, who had surprised him with her passion for the project. They identified several potential sites for affordable housing developments, including a vacant lot near the Parker's apartment building that could be transformed into a mixed-use space with housing, a community center, and a health clinic. The plans were progressing faster than Bobby had anticipated, fueled by his personal commitment and the unexpected enthusiasm of key team members who found the community focus refreshing after years of luxury developments. As summer turned to fall, Bobby's dual life continued. Corporate leader by day, regular visitor to the Parker household by evening. His relationship with Lily and Martha had deepened beyond his initial goals, becoming a source of personal fulfillment he hadn't known he was missing. In Lily, he found the honesty and perspective his wealth had insulated him from. In Martha, a wisdom that transcended education or social status. In himself, he discovered a capacity for connection he had forgotten existed. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Jennifer commented on his changed demeanor during a late-night strategy session. "I've worked with you for 10 years, Robert, and I've never seen you this engaged. Whatever sparked this change, I'm glad for it." Bobby considered her observation. "Let's just say I'm seeing things more clearly now," he replied, thinking of Lily's serious eyes and unflinching assessment of the world around her. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to recognize what's been missing. What he didn't say, couldn't articulate even to himself yet, was how deeply his encounters with Lily had affected him. The child who had stopped to help when no one else would had awakened something long dormant in his soul. The question was, what would he do with this awakening? The answer began to take shape one rainy October afternoon as he sat with Lily at her kitchen table, helping with a particularly challenging math assignment. Martha was napping in her room, her breathing easier now with the oxygen therapy, but still labored during sleep. "Bobby," Lily said suddenly, looking up from her fractions worksheet, "why are you really helping us?" The directness of the question, so characteristic of Lily, caught him off guard. He considered deflecting with a reminder of their research assistant arrangement, but the seriousness in her eyes demanded honesty. "Because you helped me when I needed it," he said simply, "and because it's the right thing to do." Lily studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed facades. "But you help lots of people now. I heard Pastor Williams talking about the new community center you're building. That's not just because of me." Bobby smiled slightly. News traveled fast in small communities. "No, not just because of you," he acknowledged. "But you showed me something important that day in the park." "What?" she asked, genuinely curious. Bobby chose his words carefully. "That the value of a person isn't in what they own or how they look. It's in what they do when someone needs help." Lily considered this, then nodded with the gravity of someone who had always understood this truth instinctively. "Grandma says the same thing. She says character is what you do when nobody important is watching." The irony of her phrasing, "nobody important," wasn't lost on Bobby. In that moment in the park, he had been nobody important to everyone except Lily. "Your grandmother is a wise woman," he said softly. Lily returned to her fractions, but Bobby remained lost in thought, an idea forming that would change all their lives irrevocably. The first frost of November had settled on Chicago when the rumors began. Bobby was reviewing architectural plans for the Southside Community Center When Jennifer knocked on his office door, her expression unusually hesitant. "Robert, there's something you should see." She placed a printout of an online gossip column on his desk. The headline made his stomach drop. "Billionaire's Secret Southside Project. Charity or something sinister." The article beneath featured a grainy photo of Bobby walking with Lily near her school, their heads bent in conversation. The text insinuated unsavory motivations behind his regular visits to the impoverished neighborhood, questioning why a wealthy developer would spend time with a young girl from the projects unless his intentions were suspect. Bobby felt the blood drain from his face. "How did they get this?" Jennifer shook her head. "Someone must have recognized you. Your community initiative has been making waves. Good ones, mostly, but this is something else." Bobby's mind raced to Lily and Martha. The article didn't name them, but the photo made Lily identifiable to anyone who knew her. "I need to warn them," he said, already reaching for his phone. "Then I need to contact our legal team. This is defamation, pure and simple." The response from Mitchell Development's chief counsel was swift but not encouraging. They could pursue legal action, but that would only draw more attention to the story. The better strategy would be to issue a brief statement explaining the community initiative and then let the story die a natural death from lack of oxygen. Bobby reluctantly agreed, but his concern for Lily and Martha remained paramount. When he arrived at their apartment that evening, he found Martha already aware of the article. A neighbor had shown her the online story on a smartphone. Her face was drawn with worry as she let him in. "Lily doesn't know yet," she said quietly. "She's at her friend Zoe's apartment studying. But this neighborhood talks, Mr. Mitchell. She'll hear something soon enough." Bobby sat heavily on their worn sofa, the weight of his carelessness pressing down on him. "I'm so sorry, Martha. I never thought—" "No, you didn't think," Martha interrupted, anger edging her normally gentle voice. "You didn't think what it might mean for a child to be associated with someone like you. In your world, maybe this is just an inconvenience, another PR problem to solve. In our world, it's dangerous." The truth of her words stung. Bobby had been so focused on helping that he hadn't considered how his presence might affect Lily's life beyond the material improvements he could provide. "What can I do?" he asked, humbled by his oversight. Martha's expression softened slightly at his evident distress. "You can be honest. With Lily, with yourself, with everyone. No more half-truths about who you are or why you're here." Bobby nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been compartmentalizing, keeping my world separate. Those worlds were always going to collide, Mr. Mitchell. Better it happens on your terms than someone else's." As if on cue, the apartment door opened and Lily entered, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her usual smile at seeing Bobby faded as she registered the tension in the room. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, looking from her grandmother to Bobby and back again. Martha nodded to Bobby, a clear signal that this was his responsibility to address. "Lily," he began carefully, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you from the beginning." He explained who he really was, not just Bobby, but Robert Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Development Corporation, one of Chicago's largest property developers. He told her about the article, showing her a sanitized version Jennifer had prepared that removed the more salacious insinuations while conveying the basic facts. Throughout his explanation, Lily's expression remained unreadable, her serious eyes taking in every word without revealing her thoughts. When he finished, the silence stretched between them like a physical barrier. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice small but steady. "So you lied about being a researcher?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," Bobby admitted. "Though the research was real, I've used everything I've learned from you to shape our community projects." "But you didn't tell me who you really were." "No, I was afraid. Afraid you might see me differently." Lily considered this, her young face thoughtful beyond her years. "The man I helped in the park, was that real? Did you really need help that day?" "Yes," Bobby said emphatically. "That was absolutely real. I really was in trouble, and you really did help me when no one else would." Something in his earnestness must have reached her because Lily nodded slowly. "Okay, but no more lies, Bobby. Or Mr. Mitchell, or whatever I'm supposed to call you now." Bobby felt a surge of relief at her tentative acceptance. Bobby is still fine. That part was always real. The immediate crisis seemed diffused, but the article's existence created new complications. Within days, reporters began appearing in the neighborhood, asking questions about the relationship between the billionaire developer and the Parker family. Speculation ran rampant, from suggestions that Lily was Bobby's illegitimate child, to theories about a secret redevelopment plan that would displace current residents. Bobby's legal team worked overtime to quash the more defamatory stories, but the attention persisted. The situation reached a breaking point when Lily came home from school in tears after classmates had taunted her about being Bobby's charity case. Martha called him immediately, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This has to stop, Mr. Mitchell. My granddaughter can't live like this." Bobby arrived at their apartment within the hour, finding Lily huddled on the sofa, her usual resilience visibly shaken. When she saw him, she didn't smile as she usually did. Instead, she asked a question that pierced his heart. "Am I just your charity case, Bobby?" "No," he answered without hesitation, kneeling before her so they were eye to eye. "You're my friend, my teacher, the person who reminded me what matters in life." He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "Lily, when you helped me that day, you didn't know who I was. You just saw someone who needed help. That's the person I want to be. Someone who helps not because of who people are, but because they need it." Lily's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But everyone's saying—" "People say a lot of things," Bobby interrupted gently. "Most of it isn't true. What's true is that you and your grandmother have become important to me, more important than I ever expected." He glanced at Martha, who watched their interaction with careful eyes. "I have an idea that might help, but it's a big change. I'd like to discuss it with both of you." Martha joined them, settling carefully into her armchair. "We're listening, Mr. Mitchell." Bobby took a deep breath. "The attention you're getting is because of me, because people don't understand why I'm here. But what if there was an official reason? What if Mitchell Development established a community scholarship program, and Lily was the first recipient?" He outlined his proposal, a formal educational fund that would cover Lily's schooling through college, presented as part of Mitchell Development's new community initiative. The program would include other children from the neighborhood as well, selected through an application process, but Lily would be the inaugural scholar. "This gives us a public reason for my involvement with your family," Bobby explained. "It shifts the narrative from speculation to something positive, and it provides for Lily's future education, which is something I've wanted to do anyway." Martha's expression remained cautious. "And our relationship? Do we become formal charity recipients rather than friends?" The question cut to the heart of Bobby's dilemma. He had begun helping the Parkers out of a sense of obligation and gratitude, but what had developed between them was far more meaningful than a charitable arrangement. "On paper, yes, there would be a formal relationship," he acknowledged. "But in reality, nothing changes between us, except that the world gets an explanation they can understand." Lily, who had been listening intently, finally spoke up. "Would I have to stop being your research assistant?" The question, so characteristic of her practical nature, made Bobby smile despite the seriousness of the situation. "No, in fact, I'd like to expand your role. The scholarship program needs a student advisor, someone who can help evaluate what other kids in the neighborhood really need." The prospect of helping others seemed to appeal to Lily. Her expression brightened slightly. "I could do that." Martha still seemed hesitant. "And the attention? The reporters?" "My PR team will handle that," Bobby assured her. "We'll make one formal announcement about the scholarship program, give a carefully controlled interview to a respected journalist, and then the story becomes about educational opportunity rather than mystery and speculation." After further discussion and Martha's reluctant agreement, the plan was set in motion. Jennifer coordinated with Mitchell Development's Public Relations Department to craft the announcement of the Mitchell Neighborhood Scholars Program, highlighting Lily's selection as the first recipient while carefully protecting her privacy. The story was strategically placed with a respected education reporter who presented it as a positive initiative rather than a source of scandal. Bobby selected a respected community leader, Pastor Williams, to serve as the program's official director, ensuring that Mitchell Development's involvement was seen as supportive rather than controlling. Gradually, the more sensationalistic coverage faded, replaced by generally positive stories about corporate investment in underprivileged communities. Bobby continued his regular visits to the Parker apartment, though now with a driver and security detail who remained discreetly outside. These precautions, initially imposed by his concerned executive team, proved necessary when a particularly persistent paparazzo attempted to follow Lily home from school. The security team's intervention was swift and professional, but the incident left Lily shaken and Bobby furious. "I never wanted to disrupt your lives this way," he told Martha that evening after Lily had gone to bed. They sat at the kitchen table, teacups between them in what had become a ritual of their evening conversations. Martha regarded him thoughtfully over her reading glasses. "Life is disruption, Mr. Mitchell. The question is whether the disruption leads somewhere better." She sipped her tea before continuing. "For all the complications, I can't deny that Lily's future looks brighter now than I ever dared hope. Her grades are improving with the tutoring, her health coverage is better than mine ever was, and she talks about college as an assumption rather than an impossible dream." The acknowledgement touched Bobby deeply. "She deserves every opportunity, Martha." "Yes, she does." Martha set down her cup with deliberate care. "But there's something you should understand. The scholarship, the medical care, the tutoring, these things are changing our circumstances, not who we are. Lily was extraordinary before you came into our lives. She'll be extraordinary with or without Mitchell Development's scholarship program." There was no resentment in her statement, just a quiet certainty that Bobby found both humbling and reassuring. Martha was right, of course. Lily's fundamental character, her compassion, her insight, her resilience, had nothing to do with his intervention. Those qualities had been nurtured by Martha's wisdom and shaped by experiences both challenging and affirming. "I know," he said simply. "That's why I want to help. Not to change who she is, but to clear the path so the world can see it too." Martha nodded, apparently satisfied with his answer. "Then we understand each other, Mr. Mitchell." As winter settled over Chicago, a new routine established itself. Bobby's visits became weekly dinners at the Parker apartment, now more comfortable with the addition of a few carefully selected furnishings that Martha had reluctantly accepted as program benefits. Lily's role as student advisor for the scholarship program had expanded to include monthly meetings with Pastor Williams and a committee of community members who would help select future scholarship recipients. The transformation extended to Mitchell Development as well. The community initiative had grown from Bobby's personal project to a core component of the company's strategy, with Jennifer now heading a dedicated department focused on socially responsible development. The Southside Community Center was under construction, providing jobs for local residents and promising a space where neighborhood organizations could operate with proper facilities and support. Through it all, Bobby found himself changing in ways both subtle and profound. The ruthless focus on profit that had defined his early career gave way to a more balanced approach that considered community impact alongside financial returns. His executive team, initially skeptical, began to recognize the business advantages of their improved community relations. Less opposition to new projects, positive press coverage, and a workforce increasingly proud of their company's direction. Yet challenges remained. Some board members questioned the allocation of resources to community projects, arguing that shareholder value should be the primary consideration. A few long-time clients, uncomfortable with the company's evolving image, took their business to competitors who maintained a more traditional approach to development. Bobby weathered these challenges with a certainty he hadn't expected to feel. The metrics of success that had guided his career, profit margins, market share, personal wealth, no longer seemed adequate measures of a life well lived. In their place was something less quantifiable, but more meaningful: the knowledge that his work was creating value beyond the balance sheet. One snowy evening in December, as Bobby prepared to leave after dinner with the Parkers, Lily presented him with a carefully wrapped package. "It's an early Christmas present," she explained, uncharacteristically shy. "I made it in art class." Bobby unwrapped it carefully to find a framed drawing, a cityscape rendered in colored pencil, showing Chicago's distinctive skyline. But unlike the typical depictions that focused on downtown's gleaming towers, Lily's drawing showed the city from the south side looking north, with neighborhood buildings in the foreground and the famous skyscrapers in the distance. Along the bottom in her neat handwriting were the words, "Different views, same city." The simple gift moved Bobby more deeply than any expensive artwork in his collection. "It's perfect, Lily," he said, his voice slightly rough with emotion. I'll hang it in my office where I can see it every day. The moment crystallized something Bobby had been feeling for months, that his connection to Lily and Martha had become essential to his sense of self, a relationship that transcended the circumstances of their meeting and the disparities in their situations. As he said his goodbyes and headed toward his waiting car, Bobby found himself thinking about family, the one he'd been born into, wealthy but emotionally distant, and the connections he'd formed since that fateful day in the park. The thought that had been forming in his mind for weeks now took clearer shape. It was time to take another risk, perhaps the biggest one yet. But first, there were preparations to make and conversations to have. Spring came to Chicago with its usual tentative beauty, crocuses pushing through lingering snow, trees budding despite the occasional frost. In the month since Christmas, Bobby's plan had taken shape, carefully constructed with the help of trusted advisors and Martha's quiet wisdom. The Mitchell Neighborhood Scholars Program had expanded to include 15 students from across the South Side, with Lily serving as a peer mentor to the newest recipients. Martha's health had stabilized, her treatment regimen now well established, and managed by a team of specialists who visited their apartment regularly. Mitchell Development's community initiative had gained national attention, with other cities reaching out to explore similar partnerships between developers and underserved neighborhoods. The Southside Community Center was nearing completion, its modern facade standing as a visible symbol of investment in an area long neglected by corporate interests. Through it all, Bobby had continued his weekly dinners with the Parkers, now an established ritual that both his staff and their neighbors accepted without question. These evenings had become an anchor in his increasingly hectic schedule, a reminder of what mattered beyond business success. It was during one such dinner in early April that Bobby finally broached the subject that had occupied his thoughts for months. Lily was clearing the dishes, insisting on handling this chore despite Bobby's offer to help, when he turned to Martha with careful casualness. "I'd like to speak with you about something important, Martha. Perhaps while Lily finishes up?" Martha's perceptive eyes registered his seriousness immediately. "Lily, take your time with those dishes, child. Mr. Mitchell and I need to have a grown-up conversation." Once they were settled in the small living room, Martha in her armchair and Bobby on the sofa, she fixed him with a direct gaze. "This must be serious if you're sending my granddaughter away to discuss it." Bobby nodded, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. "It is. It concerns both of you, actually." He took a deep breath. "Martha, I'd like to discuss the possibility of becoming Lily's legal guardian." The silence that followed was profound. Martha's expression remained unchanged, but Bobby could see her hands tighten slightly on the arms of her chair. "I see," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "And what prompted this suggestion, Mr. Mitchell?" Bobby chose his words with deliberate care. "I care deeply about Lily's future. The scholarship program ensures her education, but legal guardianship would provide additional security and opportunities." He paused, then added with complete honesty, "And selfishly, she's become important to me in ways I never anticipated. She's changed how I see the world, how I run my business, how I measure success." Martha regarded him steadily. "And my role in this arrangement? You would always be Lily's grandmother, Martha. Nothing changes that. I'm suggesting shared guardianship, legal protection and support that would supplement, not replace, your relationship with her." He leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about taking Lily away from you. It's about giving her the security of knowing that if anything happened to either of us, she would still have family." The word family hung in the air between them, its significance unmistakable. Martha was quiet for a long moment, her eyes drifting to the photographs on the wall. Lily as a toddler, Lily on her first day of school, Lily receiving her scholarship certificate. "My health isn't improving, Mr. Mitchell," she said finally. "The treatments help, but the doctors have been honest about the prognosis. I won't see Lily graduate from college." Bobby nodded, respecting her directness. "I know. That's part of why I'm suggesting this now, while you can be part of the transition and help Lily adjust to the idea." Martha studied him with the penetrating gaze that her granddaughter had inherited. "And if I say no, if I think this is too much change, too much disruption in her life, then I accept your decision," Bobby said without hesitation. "My support for Lily continues regardless. The scholarship, the medical care, all of it remains in place. This isn't conditional, Martha. Something in his immediate acceptance seemed to satisfy Martha. She nodded slowly. I need time to think about this and to pray on it. This isn't a business decision, Mr. Mitchell. This is my granddaughter's life. Of course, Bobby agreed. Take all the time you need. As if on cue, Lily returned from the kitchen, her observant eyes immediately noticing the serious atmosphere. What's wrong? She asked, looking between them with concern. Nothing's wrong, sweet pea, Martha assured her. Mr. Mitchell and I were just having a grown-up conversation about the future. Lily didn't seem entirely convinced, but she accepted the explanation, settling beside Bobby on the sofa, as she often did after dinner. Can we play chess now? I've been practicing with the computer program you gave me. The evening proceeded with their usual chess game, Bobby deliberately losing the first match to boost Lily's confidence before playing to his full ability in the second. Throughout the game, he was acutely aware of Martha watching them, her expression thoughtful as she observed their easy interaction and comfortable banter. 2 weeks passed with no mention of their conversation. Bobby continued his regular visits, respecting Martha's need for time to consider his proposal. The community center neared completion, with a grand opening scheduled for early summer. Lily's school performance continued to improve, her confidence growing as academic success reinforced her natural intelligence. Then, on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening, Bobby received a call from Martha. I've made my decision, Mr. Mitchell. Can you come by tomorrow evening? Her voice gave no indication of which way she was leaning. Of course, Bobby replied, his heart rate quickening despite his attempt at calm. Should Lily be present for this conversation? Not initially, Martha said. I'd like to speak with you privately first. The next evening found Bobby at the Parkers' door promptly at 6, a nervous energy he hadn't felt since his first major business acquisition, making his movements slightly less smooth than usual. Martha greeted him with her typical dignified warmth, but there was something different in her manner, a certainty that hadn't been there before. Lily was at a friend's apartment working on a school project, giving them the privacy Martha had requested. Once they were settled with tea, a ritual that had become comfortable over the months, Martha spoke directly. I've been watching you with my granddaughter, Mr. Mitchell, not just these past 2 weeks, but since the beginning. She sipped her tea before continuing. I've seen how you listen to her, how you value her opinions, how you challenge her to think but never dismiss her ideas because of her age, how you've changed your own business practices based on what you've learned from our community. Bobby waited, knowing Martha was building to her conclusion in her own careful way. When Lily first brought you home, I was suspicious. A wealthy man taking an interest in a child from our neighborhood. There were 1,000 reasons to worry. She set down her cup deliberately. But you've proven yourself, not with your money, but with your time, with consistency, with respect. Martha's eyes, so like Lily's in their directness, met his squarely. I'll agree to shared guardianship, under certain conditions. Relief flooded through Bobby, followed immediately by attentive focus. Name them. First, Lily continues living with me as long as my health permits. Your guardianship doesn't mean moving her to your world. Bobby nodded immediately. Absolutely. That was never my intention. Second, decisions about her upbringing, education, activities, values are made jointly. My voice carries equal weight to yours, regardless of your resources. Of course, Bobby agreed. Third, Martha continued, her voice softening slightly. When I'm gone, you make sure she remembers where she came from, not just the neighborhood, but the values, the understanding that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or address. This touched Bobby deeply. I promise, Martha. In fact, that's one of the most important lessons she's taught me. Martha nodded, apparently satisfied. Then we have an agreement, Mr. Mitchell. Or should I say, Bobby, since we're to be co-guardians. The use of his familiar name, something Martha had never done despite months of acquaintance, marked a significant shift in their relationship. Thank you, Bobby said simply, emotion making elaborate responses impossible. This means more than I can express. Don't thank me yet, Martha replied with a hint of her dry humor. We still have to tell Lily. The conversation with Lily took place that weekend, carefully planned to give her time to process the information without school pressures. Bobby and Martha sat her down in the living room, the seriousness of their manner immediately putting Lily on alert. Am I in trouble? she asked, her eyes moving between them with concern. Not at all, sweet pea, Martha assured her. But we do have something important to discuss with you. Together they explained the concept of legal guardianship in terms Lily could understand, emphasizing that it represented an addition to her family, not a replacement. Bobby carefully stressed that nothing would change immediately. She would continue living with Martha, attending her current school, maintaining all her existing friendships and activities. This is about making our connection official, he explained. It means that legally, I would be responsible for helping take care of you along with your grandmother. Lily considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Like adoption. Similar but not exactly, Bobby clarified. Your grandmother would still be your primary guardian. I would be an additional guardian, a legal recognition of the relationship we've built. And when Grandma gets too sick? Lily asked directly, her perception cutting through the careful language adults often used to shield children from difficult truths. Martha and Bobby exchanged glances, Martha nodding slightly to indicate he should answer honestly. Then you would come live with me, Bobby said gently. But we're doing everything possible to keep your grandmother healthy, and that won't change. Lily was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she asked the question that mattered most to her. Would I still be Lily Parker? Or would I have to be Lily Mitchell? The question revealed her fundamental concern, identity rather than logistics. You would always be Lily Parker, Bobby assured her. That's who you are. This doesn't change your name or who you are, just adds legal protection. This seemed to satisfy her most immediate concern. Can I think about it? She asked, displaying the careful consideration that had always been part of her nature. Of course, Martha said immediately. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need. Lily nodded, then surprised them both by asking, Can I go to my room now? I want to write in my journal. Once she had left, Bobby turned to Martha with concern. Do you think she's upset? Martha shook her head slightly. No, that's just Lily's way. She processes things by writing them down, thinking them through. She'll come to us when she's ready. Martha's assessment proved accurate. 2 days later, as they finished dinner, Lily announced she had made her decision. I have questions first, she said, pulling a small notebook from her pocket. Bobby and Martha exchanged amused glances at her methodical approach. Go ahead, Bobby encouraged. Lily opened her notebook. First question, if you become my guardian, do we have to tell everyone at school? Not if you don't want to, Bobby assured her. The legal paperwork is private. We only tell who you want to tell. Lily nodded, making a note. Second question, would I have to go to fancy parties and stuff with you? This made Bobby smile. Only if you wanted to, and not until you're older. Lily appeared relieved. Third question, would you be my dad? The directness of the question caught Bobby off guard. He glanced at Martha, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. Not exactly, he said carefully. I would be your guardian, which is a legal term, but in many ways it would be like being family. What we call each other. That's something we can figure out together over time. Lily considered this, then moved to her final question. If I say yes, can other kids from my school get guardians too? Because some of them need help more than I do. The question was so characteristic of Lily, thinking of others even in a moment focused on her future, that Bobby felt a surge of pride and affection. The guardianship is personal, Lily, but the scholarship program will continue to grow, helping as many kids as possible. And I promise to keep finding ways to support this community. This seemed to satisfy her. Lily closed her notebook and looked up, her expression solemn. Then I say yes. You can be my guardian with Grandma. The simplicity of her acceptance, after such careful consideration, touched Bobby deeply. Thank you, Lily. I promise to do my very best for you always. The legal process moved forward with careful attention to both privacy and thoroughness. Bobby's attorneys, accustomed to complex business transactions, found themselves navigating family court procedures with the same diligence they applied to corporate acquisitions. By early summer, the shared guardianship was officially recognized, with provisions carefully structured to protect Lily's interests and honor Martha's primary role in her upbringing. The news, when it eventually became public, created less sensation than Bobby had feared. The groundwork laid by the scholarship program and community initiative had established a context that made the guardianship seem a natural extension of his involvement rather than a sudden development. The community center's grand opening provided a perfect opportunity to demonstrate the strength of their unusual family unit. Bobby, Martha, and Lily stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, their comfortable interaction speaking volumes about the genuine connection they had formed. The center itself stood as a testament to Bobby's transformed vision, not a corporate monument, but a true community resource with spaces designed based on neighborhood input and programs developed to address local needs. Later that evening, as they shared a quiet dinner at a small restaurant near the center, Bobby found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. From that moment of weakness in the park to this new beginning, the path had been neither straight nor simple. Yet each step, each challenge had been necessary to create the bond they now shared. "Penny for your thoughts, Mr. Mitchell," Martha said, noticing his contemplative expression. Despite the change in their legal relationship, she still occasionally used the formal address, a gentle reminder of the distance they had overcome. "I was just thinking about disguises," Bobby replied with a small smile. "About how sometimes we have to lose them to find what we're really looking for." Martha nodded, understanding as she always did. "And what were you looking for?" "I didn't know until I found it," Bobby admitted. "Connection, purpose beyond profit, a chance to make a difference that matters." Lily, who had been quietly enjoying her dessert, looked up at this. "Like when you fell in the park?" she asked. The memory still clear despite the time that had passed. Bobby nodded. "Exactly like that. I thought I was testing the city, but really, the city was testing me, and I would have failed if not for you." Lily considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "I'm glad you failed that test," she said finally. "Otherwise we wouldn't be a family now." The simple statement encompassed everything their journey had been about, the unlikely connection between a wealthy man playing at poverty and a child who had recognized human need beneath the disguise, a connection that had transformed into something neither could have anticipated that day in the park. As summer bloomed across Chicago, their unusual family settled into new routines. Bobby maintained his penthouse but spent several nights each week in a newly renovated apartment near the Parkers, allowing him to be present for school events and evening activities without disrupting Lily's established life. Martha's health remained stable, her medical team now supplemented by specialists Bobby had quietly arranged to consult on her case. The Mitchell Neighborhood Scholars Program continued to expand, with Lily's insight guiding the selection process in ways that identified potential beyond test scores and grades. 1 year to the day after their first encounter, Bobby suggested a special outing. "I'd like to go back to the park," he told Lily and Martha over breakfast, "to commemorate the day that changed everything." Martha, who tired easily but insisted on joining them for important occasions, agreed to a short visit. They made their way to the spot where Bobby had collapsed, and Lily had stopped to help. The park looked different in the summer sunshine, vibrant with flowers and visitors enjoying the perfect weather. Yet the bench where they had shared Lily's lunch remained unchanged, a silent witness to the moment that had altered the course of 3 lives. As they stood together, Bobby placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "I want to thank you again," he said quietly, "for stopping that day, for seeing me when no one else did." Lily leaned against him comfortably, their relationship now easy with familiarity. "I just did what Grandma taught me, to help people who need it." Martha smiled at this, pride evident in her expression. "Some lessons take better than others," she observed. "That one you learned perfectly." Bobby thought about the lessons he had learned, about wealth and worth, about seeing beyond surfaces, about the true meaning of value, about how a child's simple act of kindness could spark a transformation that rippled outward, affecting not just his life but an entire community. "I have something for both of you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He handed Martha and Lily each a small velvet box. Inside were matching silver pendants, simple in design but meaningful in symbolism, a hand reaching out to another. "To remind us how this all began," he explained, with one person reaching out to another. Lily immediately put hers on, the silver catching the sunlight as it settled against her t-shirt. Martha examined hers with evident emotion before allowing Bobby to help fasten it around her neck. "Thank you," she said simply, the words encompassing far more than gratitude for the gift. As they walked slowly through the park, Lily between them, Bobby reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. He had started his monthly disguises, seeking to understand a reality his wealth had insulated him from. What he had found instead was a truth more profound, that authentic connection transcends circumstance, that value exists beyond balance sheets, that family can form in the most unexpected moments. From a man collapsed on the pavement to a man with renewed purpose, from a child selling candy to a child changing her community, from strangers divided by circumstance to a family united by choice. Their story had come full circle in ways none of them could have imagined that fateful day in the park. As they left the park together, Bobby didn't need a disguise to see the world clearly. He simply needed to look through Lily's eyes that had always seen past appearances to what truly mattered. And in that vision, he had found not just a family, but a future worth building, one connection at a time.